Hi everyone, Sean here, and welcome to this video about modern money. By now, throughout this series, we have explored a lot about what money is and how certain systems arose, but now it's time to discuss in more detail the system that we have today. The reality is that most of us never think about how our system of money works at all. Back to what I said in my video, What is Money? A system of money is the base layer for all of civilization. Having a method to exchange and value things is what allows a society to exist in the first place, where then we can develop the rules, institutions, and systems that we argue about all the time today. The system of money comes first, and you have to get it right. In the US, we are lucky to have the most stable form of modern money on the planet. But there are trade offs that are inherent to the system that affect everyone in ways that we don't often think about. So let's get started. First, let's take a look at how money today is created. Since 1971, the supply of dollars is no longer pegged to a certain amount of gold. This is important to realize because it means that the US dollar as its own currency has only existed for 49 years. Before that, the dollar was just a representation of gold. The dollar as we know it is a relatively new creation, and not being restricted by reserves of gold, there's no true cap to the amount of dollars that can exist. New money is created through our system of fractional reserve banking. What banks do is loan out money. When a bank gives out a loan, that's new money being created out of nowhere. The bank gives you money that it doesn't have. Regular banks have certain restrictions on how much money they can create. Usually, there's a reserve ratio that specifies how much money they can create in relation to the amount of deposits that they hold. Central banks can create money at will and without limit, but it's their job to keep the economy stable, so they follow certain principles. They might buy or sell government bonds in order to increase or decrease the amount of money in circulation to avoid inflation or deflation. They might also make direct loans, but that is usually to regular banks. The Federal Reserve, the US central bank, varies the interest rate of these loans in order to influence the economy, to either stimulate or discourage borrowing. It's fair to wonder, why can't we just print as much money as we want? How does inflation work? Let's look at a very basic pretend example. Say that there are two goods in an economy, one apple and one fork. In this example, the money supply is $10. Only $10 exists in this world. The apple is $7 and the fork is $3. If suddenly we decide to create 10 more dollars and now there's $20 in the world, what happens to the price of apples and forks? Well, the prices adjust to the new amount of money, and now apples are $14 and forks are $6. While the real world is so much more complex, the point that printing more dollars doesn't let you buy more stuff holds true. Over time, prices rise along the influx of new money. This is called inflation. How is inflation measured? In the US, the main way to measure inflation is through the Consumer Price Index. The CPI measures the prices of a basket of goods and compares them year to year to see how much prices are rising. The basket of goods represents the most common things that people spend their money on. Prices of things like food, transportation, and many other sectors are all included in the CPI to determine the rate of price inflation. One of the common points I've made throughout this entire series is that eventually most currencies end up failing through hyperinflation. So, why would we want any inflation in our money? Why do we want our dollar to lose 2% of its value every year? Why don't we have a fixed amount of money that never changes? Simply put, having a low level of inflation encourages investment. Inflation is a tax on saving. If the amount of money you have over time is not growing, it's losing value by design. This encourages people to invest their money to have it grow more than inflation is devaluing it. This doesn't just mean invest in things like stocks, it means taking out loans to do things like starting your own business. This focus on investment encourages growth and results in new product creations and quality of life improvements. To go along with that, inflationary systems result in the value of debt being reduced over time, which is a good thing. Buying a house in 1970 for $100,000 doesn't hurt as much when by the time you finish off paying the mortgage in 2020, because of inflation, that house is now worth $300,000. Finally, inflationary systems allow for government flexibility. If we did not have an inflationary system, the government would not be able to step in and act in emergency situations, like the one we're dealing with now with COVID-19. If money was not inflationary, the government would not be able to have implemented a stimulus until it was paid for by a new tax and that tax was collected. There are downsides to inflationary systems, though, and I don't think many of us realize this. The central bank or government has to be trusted to keep inflation in check. We take it for granted here in the US, but this is not easy to do. Modern currencies having problems with inflation is the norm, not the exception. In an inflationary system, saving is penalized. It's supposed to be. It's by design. New products, companies, technologies don't get built unless people build them. The Federal Reserve and the government want you to spend your money, to invest in things. But this hurts people who just want to save their money. If you're keeping all of your money in the bank, earning 0.1% interest, you're losing purchasing power every year through inflation. If you're not invested in something that will grow your money over time, you're going to be continuously losing purchasing power over decades. Additionally, asset bubbles have begun to pop up more and more in recent history. People may not consciously realize that inflation is a tax on savings, but they do understand that prices go up over time. This encourages people to dump their money into financial vehicles like the stock market, or in real estate, or other riskier things in search of high returns. Any way to try and maintain their value over time is used, and that can lead to bubble growth that will eventually pop. Finally, all of this increases inequality. In a system like this, which is, again, by design, the people that are punished the most by inflationary money are those who don't have money to invest. People living paycheck to paycheck, saving whatever they can in the bank for a rainy day or emergency fund, or any savings they can get. People at the bottom can't afford to risk their money in assets like stocks, yet they're penalized for simply saving. Here is a chart which shows the expansion of M2 over time. M2 is a commonly used measure for the money supply. We can clearly see that the supply of money has been increasing rapidly. And remember, the US left the gold standard in 1971, at which point there became no limit in the amount of dollars that could exist. We see here that the supply of money has been growing exponentially since we left the gold standard. Yet journalists, economists, and politicians tell you that inflation has been low. Inflation was 2.3% in 2019, exactly around what we aimed for. So what am I talking about? Well, it's become clear to me that the places where this new money is going, where hidden inflation is occurring, is to places that are outside of the consumer price index. It makes sense why assets such as stocks are not included in the CPI. They're not a physical good that you buy, but stocks are somewhere where money goes. And while rent is included in the CPI, the price of buying a home is not. The CPI measures out-of-pocket healthcare costs like insurance premiums, but completely overlooks and fails to cover the overall increases in the healthcare system. What's happening is that we, or the Federal Reserve, is creating all of this new money that flows into the economy. Because of the design of our monetary system, our base layer, the people that benefit the most from this, that are able to access this new money, are those that already have financial security. people who are middle class and above can afford to take out loans to make new investments. The abundance of cheap money through very low interest rates has allowed for those at the top to grow and grow and grow, while those at the bottom are punished for saving money in their bank accounts. This new money gets financialized, which is how we can see a stock market hit all-time highs after growing for 10 years straight prior to the coronavirus. We don't see it in the official inflation numbers, but it's everywhere. Yes, the average consumer can buy a house for a lower interest mortgage than ever, but a large company will also take out loans to buy more factories, more equipment, more whatever, and increase that gap at the top. The point I want you to all take away from this is that this tax on savings and this inequality is part of the fundamental design of our money. This is apolitical, and the roots run deeper than that. Whether your government is the status quo, or socialist, or libertarian, this inequality growth will always occur as long as the form of money is inflationary. Governments do amplify this further through certain policies and through deficit spending, which also creates new money. When you have new money created through a deficit finance tax cut, like the Republicans passed, or want to create new money to fund something like a Green New Deal, the end result is still a dilution in the value of the dollar, and the people at the bottom who can't afford to invest their money have their savings hurt. So, am I calling for a return to the gold standard after all of what I just said about how our system of money has all of these negative effects? No, I'm not. The fact is, being stuck to a gold standard can legitimately hinder societal progress. It's not only possible, but it's likely that if we stayed on a gold standard since 1971, technology would not have advanced as fast and the quality of life overall would be worse today. No, the takeaway from all of this is that there are trade-offs. There are advantages to the current system of money that we have today that have never existed before. But there are also disadvantages. Some things are worse about our current system than they were before. We haven't solved money yet. I wanted to make this video because I don't believe that people realize that there are any trade-offs. They don't think about how money works. But it's important, and it affects things, and there are problems with it. One final note I will end on is the idea that a lot of the political issues of today date back to the 1970s. Increasing healthcare and college tuition costs and the general growth of inequality all really first started around this time period. Yet all of the blame for these things gets put to various aspects of politics and politicians without even considering the massive change we made to our base layer, our system of money, in 1971. Inflationary money and the massive exponential expansion of the money supply since then is not the only reason for these kind of problems, but it does have an impact. And I hope now that you see our system of money leads to real trade-offs for a society. Many of them good, but also some of them bad. So thank you for watching this video, everyone. I do appreciate it. I hope it provoked some thought. Moving forward, our next video will discuss gold, its histories, the properties that make it valuable, and why it still is worth having today. After that video, we will introduce Bitcoin as a new digital money that has many of the same properties as gold, but also provides some insights about how money will look and develop into the future. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.